Good morning. After a great weekend, I'm glad to get a few minutes together with you today. We're going to be in Romans chapter 5 and some other spots in a minute or two here. But I just wanted to take a moment and say thanks for your faithfulness. I don't know if there's ever been a time where there has been more unsettling and around us nationally as well as locally. And yet, we've seen God's blessing and his help and his provision. And I think of the disciples, that they thought Jesus was going to set up his earthly kingdom all the way to the book of Acts chapter 1. Prior to the crucifixion, they thought he was going to set up his kingdom. When he died, their hopes were lost. Everything we thought was going to happen didn't happen. And we just were sure that this was the Messiah. And there he is dead in a tomb. And they're mourning and grieving. 3 days later, the ladies find the stone rolled away and the body gone, and they go tell the disciples, and a couple of the disciples come to the tomb, and man, things are really messed up. And oversight from God, everything's right on schedule. Everything's perfectly in plan, and they're from the bottom up, looking at the crucifixion, the horrible, traumatic, the events of the day, and the trial, the mocking, the physical abuse, the ridicule of the precious Savior, all that went on. It was just more than the disciples could bear. I don't know how you could face it. And then he's gone, and they'd left jobs, they'd left all their plans, and their friends all knew these guys were followers, apostles of this one called Jesus. And for 3 days, it was just, what do we do? The emotion, if you've had any serious grief, you know what it's like to sit and just, you don't know what to do. You just sit. And, you look out one window for a while, then you go look out the other window for a while. You don't know what to do. And then the body's gone. And one of the ladies says, I saw him. You're thinking, oh yeah, this overly emotional woman, sure, she saw him. And then he comes through the door. And they're all there but Thomas. And then he comes through again when Thomas is there. And just confusion. The world was in, you think we're in a world of confusion. You think we're facing awkward and difficult times, and in times you're not sure how to act. The founding of the church was such a time of absolutely no human control. Everything was wrenched out of their hands. And there was a corrupt government. There was corrupt religion. There were people, of course, that took advantage of things, as they always do. And some of the religious people paying Judas to betray Jesus, Judas hanging himself. And the crowd that covets after money never wins. That crowd that will do anything to sell out the truth, that will do anything and sell out the truth to get gain, they're always, Judas is a eternal reminder of the love of money is the root of all evil. And when we start letting our moral, ethical, and religious decisions be based on money and personal gain, we are in deadly, deadly territory. Better to swim through shark-infested waters with cut open bait tied to your arms and legs. And what a terrible spot to be in. But here, Judas's greed, the betrayal, Judas was one of their friends. They never dreamed he would be that kind of a person. And all that went on, and now he's back, and what are we doing, and what a mess. And Jesus said, go preach into all the world, and somehow they end up in a fishing boat. And Jesus comes out and calls them in and talks to them once more. Just unsettling days. And then after a lengthy time of prayer, they're in Acts chapter 2 and praying a great long prayer meeting in Acts chapter 1. In Acts chapter 2, they're filled with the Holy Spirit. They go out preaching, and the world is turned upside down. It's never been the same. Now, just because everything was in turmoil doesn't mean God didn't have his perfect plan. in Galatians 4:4, it says, when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that are under the law. And he had it all planned, the fullness of time. There was a schedule. The wise men coming from the east, the star, everything was planned. Herod, the wicked governor who called people to go be taxed. Well, Jesus wouldn't have been born in Bethlehem if the bad governor hadn't made everybody go to their hometown to be taxed. God's in charge. Now, I'm not super Christian, and I'm like you. Some days we can get discouraged, and we get thinking, I know God's in charge, but I sure don't agree with what he's doing, however you want to put it. But he's a good, faithful father, and he loves his own. And whatever that battle is, that confusion you're dealing with, medical or financial or whatever, God's going to see you through it, and he's so good. And I wanted to read you, thinking about some of the pressures. I've got this book, Lewis Payton Little, and basically it's a book written from the official city, county, state records from Virginia, and it's imprisoned preachers and religious liberty in Virginia. I'm just going to read you a little bit. Arriving in Culpeper, the first meeting in Wiley's house, a man named Samuel Harris shows up, and he preached without interruption. The next day, as he began to preach, opposers immediately raised a violent opposition, appearing with whips, sticks, and clubs. Well, today the violent opposition is Facebook, Instagram, and other social media, so as to hinder his labors, in consequence of which he went that night over to Orange County. He just went across the way a little bit and did it again. And he preached with much effect. And he continued many days preaching from place to place, attended by great crowds, and followed throughout the meetings by several persons who had been either lately converted or seriously awakened under the ministry of the Baptists, and also of the regular Baptists, and also by many who had been alarmed by his own labors. He stirred people up. The conversion of Samuel Harris was huge, and it's in here. And I won't go into that maybe another time, but Samuel Harris' conversion was big in the area around Culpeper, Virginia. They knew it was a big deal that Samuel Harris got saved, and now he's preaching. And then rough treatment. Rough was the treatment which Mr. Harris met with amongst his rude countrymen. In one of his journeys in the county of Culpeper, Captain Ball and his gang came to the place where he was preaching and said, "You shall not preach here." A bystander, whose name was Jeremiah Minor, replied, "But he shall." From this sharp contention of words, they proceeded to a sharper contest of blows and scuffles. And friends on both sides interested themselves, some to make peace and others to back their foreman. The supporters of Mr. Harris, that's the preacher, were probably most of them worldly people who acted from no other motive than to defend the minister, thus insulted and abused. But if they were Christians, they were certainly too impatient and resentful, and manifested too much of the spirit of Peter when he drew his sword on the high priest's servant. Colonel Harris, this was a converted colonel in the army there, Colonel Harris' friends took him to a house and sent Lewis Craig to guard the door. While he was preaching, so he's preaching there. He didn't stop. He just went to the next house, started preaching, and sent Lewis Craig to guard the door. Presently, Ball's gang came up and drove the sentinel from his stand, battered open the door, only to be driven back by the people within. Thus, this involved them in another contest, and this is written mid-1700s. Thus, the day ended in confusion. And he goes on, the next chapter. Samuel Harris arrested as a vagabond, a schismatic, and a disturber of the peace. Now, to me, it's just hilarious. Here's this guy who goes to preach. That's all. He's just going to preach. People come in with sticks and clubs to threaten him, and he's arrested as a disturber of the peace and a vagabond and a schismatic person. Now, look, we've got to step back and understand this whole world is an evil place. And the devil's got all kinds of workers around, and sometimes they are religious, and sometimes they're probably saved. I'm not going to judge who's saved and who's not, but I know there's some people who call themselves Christians can be pretty evil, and some people who are religious can partake in some pretty evil deeds. And so we need to step back and take a deep breath and say, my job is my job. That's my job. And whether you're a lineman in the football team or a goalie in the hockey team, you got a job to do. And if there's a problem out there, there's a problem over there, you just leave that problem and you go do your job. And our job is to preach the gospel. That's our job. People write books, they call it apologetics. And it's like the word apologize, so I don't really know where the word came from. I never looked into it, but I'm not apologizing for the Bible, but apologetics is the study of defending the Bible scientifically, asked from space and science and maybe from evolution, fossil evidence, or whatever it might be. Defending the Bible, prophetically fulfilled prophecies, but the science of apologetics is proving the Bible to be accurate and to be true. You're defending it. And then I've heard preachers that I kind of agree with. The Bible doesn't need to be defended. It needs to be used. Somebody comes into your house, you don't need to explain that the 9mm pistol you hold shoots a projectile of solid lead or steel or whatever at a certain number of feet per second. You just aim it and pull the trigger if you choose to do that. But the Word of God is powerful, and our job is to keep doing our job. And so in regard to these trials, in Romans chapter 5, the Apostle Paul writes in verse 3, not only so, but we glory in tribulation, knowing that tribulation worketh patience. These troubles, the difficulties that come, they work on us. And we don't like them, and we would not wish for them to return, and we wouldn't wish them to have ever come, but they come, and we don't have a choice in the matter. God doesn't say, hey, you got up this morning, would you like trouble A, trouble B, or trouble C? God just tosses things into your life, and sometimes those troubles go on for a long time. Medical problems. I was thinking about Marlene Evans. I mentioned her the other day. I want to say 13 years or something. She was battling cancer, and she was just tired. She was tired of it. Tired of more doctor appointments, tired of more chemo, tired of more radiation, tired of more, all that goes on. It just wears you down. This old body of ours, it can get worn down, but we need to be renewed in our spirit. The spirit of a man, Proverbs says, will sustain his infirmity, but a broken or a wounded spirit who can bear. We got to keep us strong. We got to keep us up and close to God, the soul inside us. And we can't change the ingrown toenail or the arthritic hands, but I can stay close to God. And maybe I'm in a wheelchair, maybe I don't get out very much, but you know what I can do? I can pray, and I can seek to use my limited abilities to honor God. There's some things. So he says that tribulation works patience. And so these trials that we face, you don't see any instruction in the Bible on how to keep from having trials. Jesus said, in the world you shall have tribulation. There is the assurance they're going to come. And Paul said that of afflictions, he said, we are appointed there too. Like you have a doctor's appointment, and you got an appointment at the DMV, tragically, and then you got an appointment with this problem. And God's got the appointment sitting there right in the midst of your day, maybe right when you had something else going on, and there, boom, this trouble comes, and you think, I don't like this appointment, but we are appointed there too. And so tribulation works patience. And so he says there in the next verse, better look at patience, verse 4, patience works, or patience come experience. So tribulation brings me patient. And I deal with this problem, and I learn to quiet myself. I learn to step back and say, it's okay. I can deal with this. And you've seen people on crutches or wheelchairs. You've seen people, a widower, gone through a divorce, maybe whatever it might be. But you've seen people with a trial that's not going to pass ever, or maybe not for a long time. And it's going to be a long-term pressure to them. But you know what? After a while, they learn to use those crutches. After a while, they don't like it, but they learn to deal with that difficulty, the loss of a spouse or the bankruptcy. We survive these things. And so, see, tribulation, it makes us patient. Then he says, patience brings experience. And so, my trouble makes me patient. And as I patiently work through this, now I'm experienced at it. Now I realize I can do this. I've done that. I've changed tires before. I can change this tire. I remember the first time I worked on semi trucks, some in Indiana when I was in my last year or two of college. And I ended up doing the emergency road repairs. Most of the time it was a frozen water line or a tire. And so you don't have to be a real brain to do those things, but they had to teach me. And then after a while, and then sometimes I'd go out and there wouldn't be a compressor available. The truck with the compressor would be somewhere else. So now I'm going out with a pickup with tools, but no compressor. So I'm using a hand jack to jack the truck up, and then I'm getting the tire off without any air wrenches, and 6-foot cheater bars on the wrenches to get the lug nuts off and get the thing. And if you've done mechanics, you know it's the inside tire. It's not the outside dual, it's the inside dual. So you got to take the outside one off, and it weighs 1,000 pounds, not really, but it's heavy. Get that out of the way. Then you got to take the inside one off and get more lug nuts off and take the inside, and then you got to go, and I'd have to break it down with no air, no help, and a tire hammer and get it off. Then I'd have to go to a gas station somewhere where I can find a compressor and patch the tire, air it back up, and check it to be sure it's right, and then put it back on, and then put the outside dual back on and get the lug nuts in place. And you know what? The first couple of times I did that, I thought, there's a lot of work. I didn't mind hard work, but I'm thinking about this driver. He's on the road and he's losing money. Every minute he's on the road, he's losing money. He's on the side of the road, sitting there. But after a while, I realized I can do this. And they've been driving truck for years. They know they're going to have these days happen. It's their flat tire. I didn't give them a flat tire. I'm just there making $5 an hour, charging them $100 to change a tire. And I got maybe $10 or $15 out of it at the most. It might have taken me an hour to change a tire. And maybe if it was a problem, an hour and a half. So I got $5 to $10. And I'd have gotten the same money back in the warm shop, sitting there doing some work on an engine that's not in the snow and not out in the heat. And so my pay didn't change being out there on the road. But, a tribulation works patience, and patience experience. I got to experience that. I've done this before, and I can do this. I've got a split rim, or I don't even know if they use split rims anymore. At the time, I thought we shouldn't be using these because I'm too busy and I'm inexperienced enough. I want to kill myself with these things. And they had a lot of aluminum rims we had then that weren't the split rim, but most of you don't know what that means anyway. But maybe Mr. Mooney would know. He would certainly know. But you get experienced. Now, look at what happens. So tribulation works patience. Patience, experience. Now, look at that next word, experience. That brings hope. Hope is that thing, that little spark in your heart that says it's going to be okay. That little bright spot in the midst of a dark world that says we're going to be all right. Now, how do you get that spark of hope in this dark world? You get it from experience. Where do you get the experience? You get it from patiently facing the tribulations. The tribulation works patience, experience, and experience hope. And you realize I can get through this. It'll be okay. I know I'm laying down in the snow and it's 10 degrees and I'm trying to thaw this truck's fuel lines, but I've been here before. I've done this, and I can get this guy back on the road. And I was going to say those are the good old days. Those weren't good old days. Those were just days a long time ago that I'm very grateful are gone. But look at verse 5. And hope maketh not ashamed, because the love of God is shed abroad in our heart. I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed to go through this. I'm not embarrassed to face this trial. I've been through some trials. And I was with one of our young men in our church who's had more surgeries. I was sitting with this family and the doctor, the surgeon, and going into surgery. And we were just sitting there talking. And the doctor looked at this young man and said, I think you've done this more times than I have. And he smiled. And I thought, oh, I can't believe you're smiling. What, you're going to go in and face this surgery again. And hope. See, his tribulation works patience. The patience made him experience. The experience brings hope. And he knew at the end of this, it's going to be okay. There's some darkness that's going to come, but we're going to be all right. We've done this, and we've gone through it before, and I made it, and I'm going to make it again this time. And see, hope keeps us from being ashamed. Hope is that thing that as I face that trial, I realize I can look at this thing in hope, and I'm not embarrassed about my hope. I'm not embarrassed about the trial. This is a part of life. We're going to go through trials. We're going to go through tribulations. We're going to have burdens. James chapter 1 says, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing that tribulation works patience. And no, that's in Romans here. Let me look over to James and get that quoted right. Count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptation, knowing that the trying of your faith works patience. But let patience, that's in verse 3 of James 1, but let patience have her perfect work. And so patience works on us, and the tribulation works on us. And but what it does, you go through enough trials, you realize I can do this. I've gone through this before, and we're going to be fine because we serve a good God and a faithful God, and he's going to sustain us, and he's going to strengthen us, and it's going to be okay. This book, I mean, that's a pretty good sized book, and there's maybe only one or two pictures in it. It's just writing and writing and writing. There's a picture of the Culpeper Baptist Church, but basically this is just story after story of people who got beat. You know why Samuel Harris had no problem when he's threatened with violence over here to just go over to another house, put a guard at the door and preach over there? He'd done it before. He'd been beat up before. He'd been tossed in jail before. It's okay. He was a colonel in the army. He's been shot at. He'd had people try to kill him. You know what? I'm doing it for Jesus now. That's way better than doing it for Uncle Sam. And we've got a great faith. We've got a great God, and he's going to be near to us, and he's going to help us. And count it all joy, James says, James 1, and here, knowing that tribulation will eventually, it'll do something in our heart and keep us from being embarrassed about this trial. It's a real trial, but I'm going to be fine. And it's a real trial, and you're going to make it through it. And God's going to give you grace. And you know what I love about where our country is right now? It looks dark politically. It looks dark morally. I mean, evil, it looks like it's raising its head up and like evil's going to take over. And I think, I read the book, and evil does not win. You get back here toward the back, and evil is in big, big trouble. Evil loses, good wins. The devil gets tossed into a lake of fire. Jesus is on his throne in Jerusalem. The people of God, we're riding back from heaven on white horses, cheering Jesus on as he destroys the armies of the devil and his worldly leaders at the valley of Megiddo. Folks, we're in good shape. And, I remember the first time I heard the song, I'm on the winning side. Curtis Hudson was dying of cancer, a pancreatic cancer. And he was pretty young. I want to say he's in his early 50s, but he might have been older than that. But he seemed young to me. What a preacher. And I heard him share his testimony. And he went through several very key things in that sermon. And he said he'd just give a brief testimony. Well, he preached 30 or 40 minutes. And because he was pretty sick, and he said, I'll try and say a few words. They invited him up, said, could you say something? You feel up to it? And he said, well, I'll try and say a few words. 30, 40 minutes later, he calls his own pianist up to the piano, because he was up north where piano players don't know how to play like they do from the South. And he got a guy on that piano that could play all the keys. And I heard him sing, I'm on the winning side. And that's the first time I heard that. Well, since then, that's become very popular. I think he kind of brought that song out in the light. And also that same day, he sang the song New Grace. There'll be new grace when it's my time to die. And that God will give me grace when it comes. And it was approaching him. It's the last time that I know of that he preached in public. He might have preached more the last time I know of. And it wasn't at our church, it was back east at the college there, at Hyles Anderson College. And but when the time comes, God will give us grace. And these trials, they're from God. We don't need to fret. The devil can't touch us. Like Job's story, the devil can't touch us. without getting an okay from the Father. And my Father knows what's best, and He's working on me, and He's conforming me to the image of His Son. So what's my job? My job is to keep doing right. If I'm hated, I'm still supposed to love. If I'm stolen, somebody's stolen from me, I'm still supposed to give. If I've had bankruptcy and lost my business, I'm still supposed to witness. I'm still supposed to praise God. I'm still supposed to read the Bible to my children. See, our marching orders don't change. If a dear fellow soldier is wounded in battle, help your fellow soldier and then keep shooting. Our job is the same job. Just keep doing the right thing. Older, younger, keep loving God, love His Bible, do justly, love mercy, walk humbly, Micah 6:8 says. And we just need to rest. Our job is just be steady, living for God day in, day out. Honor God, love your neighbor as yourself, which is not always easy, and love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Rest in Him, trust in Him, and He's going to make you perfect and spotless and present you before His presence with exceeding joy. It's Ephesians 5. What a great promise that we're going to be near to Him. We'll be with Him. I want to encourage you. You just keep doing your job. Just keep doing the right thing. And one day that trumpet's going to sound. We're going to be caught up together to meet the Lord in the air. And no more. We're going to leave all my trouble on this earth. One song, I'll leave all my troubles behind. Goodbye, world, goodbye. I'm out of this place. The sooner, the better. I heard a preacher say not long ago, he's in heaven now, but I was listening to a sermon, and he said, there's one thing people talk about what God can do and can't do. He said, I'll tell you something God can't do. He can't come soon enough for me. And like many of us, we've had the pleasures of life and family and service and work, and we've been able to do some things. You know what? We're ready to go. We're ready to see the Lord, and what a great day that will be. And I hope you'll make today a great day, and I hope you make this week a great week. And if you would think of it, pray for our senior class as they're traveling. I'm thinking, depending on when you watch this, they're either in the air or they're in the East Coast. They're on their senior trip. And just pray God would bless them and keep them safe and keep them near to Him. So thanks again. And Lord willing, tomorrow morning we'll take a few minutes together.